Namaste, good afternoon everyone. I've often been asked why I have delved so deeply into Joel Goldsmith's teachings. I do understand that Goldsmith is quite unknown today being a bit over 60 years since his passing. Now this goes back to COVID times when we all had a lot of time on hand since we couldn't really go to our offices as such, and I did some extensive reading during those months. Now I recalled a talk where Eckhart Tolle, for those who are familiar with him, the author of The Power of Now and a New Earth, in that talk he mentioned about being influenced by Goldsmith's teachings, and this got me very curious because whatever Eckhart says or recommends I take very seriously. And so this is when I started exploring Joel Goldsmith's teachings. I ordered some books of Goldsmith from Amazon and started reading them. Now, for me, what I understood was, or rather what I realized, I had never been exposed to the teachings of Jesus Christ. I hadn't studied them at all, to be honest. And when I found out that Goldsmith's entire teaching was based on the teachings of Jesus, according to the Gospel of St. John, then it gave me the opportunity to dive into Jesus' teachings. And I found Goldsmith very accessible to read. Now perhaps the reason for this is because I already had the background of Advaita as taught by Ramesh ji. You see, Ramesh ji was also educated in England, spoke refined English, spoke very well. I could understand him very easily. And I found Goldsmith's style of his lectures, his delivery, his writing, all very palatable. So when he spoke about the infinite invisible, when he spoke about words from the Bible, it was really like a hot knife through butter as far as I was concerned. And it was so close in spirit to Advaita, non-duality. That is actually the clincher as far as I was concerned, because that is my core interest, not healing as such. Goldsmith was a remarkable healer, no doubt. He trained many students. Now, in my teenage years, I too had this interest and passion to explore the healing modalities. I would say right up to my early 30s perhaps. Various workshops I had attended, right from Reiki, pranic healing, the Melchizedek method, this, that, left, right, everything, but nothing really stuck. And of late, I had come to the conclusion that it's a tricky business to heal people, especially if one is not healed oneself. So Sadhguru is quite right. In fact, I heard it in one of his talks where he said that we should really not try and interfere into another person's karma. When I heard that, it appealed to me, and not only that, I had this kind of innate knowing that only an enlightened being could heal as such. Because you see, the karmic process is very complex. Recently, I came across the works of the Russian Sergei Lazarev, I hope I pronounced him correctly, where he said that the healer's karmic distortions in the bioenergy field can be transferred to the patient. So all this business of healing was quite suspect. But when I read Goldsmith talk about healing, and making it clear it was not about healing another individual, but rather one's own consciousness and whatever had impinged in it about the other. This really grabbed my attention. And I must say it resonates deeply with me because it kind of helped me understand Ramana Maharshi and his statements, especially when miracles took place in his wake, that he had nothing to do with them. And he referred to the divine activity which produced the healing, without an intent, without a sankalpa. And when I read, I think it was in Ganesan's book, that Goldsmith had visited Ramana Ashram. I don't know which year, whether he visited it when Ramana Maharshi was in the body or after that, I don't know as of now. But that kind of connected the Advaita threads for me. And I found so much of Rameshji's teachings in his talks, and it provided me with much clarity. And so that is why I felt like sharing this with people, because the exposure to Advaita, as I said, gave me a firm grounding in what Goldsmith was trying to convey. And so I hope all of you listening to this series and the other podcasts I've done on Goldsmith's books can see the amalgamation of Advaita and the teachings of Jesus. This East-West spiritual tradition combination is so beautiful when it happens in such a seamless way. And it is in this spirit that I share these teachings and my understanding of them with you all. Thank you. It would be nice to do a deep dive into Joel Goldsmith's book, The Thunder of Silence. I believe I haven't covered this book before. And the reason was that I felt if people got familiar with his works first, based on these podcasts, and also familiar with the teachings of Advaita, then at a later date we could explore this particular book, which I find most enlightening, one could say. Most enlightening. Pushes the envelope further and really pushes the concepts harder, at least according to me. As you might be aware, when I have referred to silence, it is basically the silence of the thinking mind. When that is subdued or maybe annihilated, what one is left with is conscious presence, being. The being which Nisargadatta Maharaj would refer to, abide in your being. Now here, Joel Goldsmith gives us another perspective. He says, the silence is not an absence of sound, but is a state of consciousness which enables us to refrain from mental reaction to what is seen or heard. Once again, the silence is not an absence of sound, but is a state of consciousness which enables us to refrain from mental reaction to what is seen or heard. For example, we may see and recognize a shadow on the wall and yet have no reaction of fear, knowing it to be a shadow. Then Goldsmith goes on to say, when consciousness has attained the awareness of one power, one law, one substance, one cause, oneness, we do not respond with fear, doubt or horror to anything seen or heard, and then it is that consciousness has gone beyond power and attained the silence, the healing consciousness. So this is quite different in expression from Rameshji's teachings, yet it points to the same thing, that when we accept God's will, when we accept the person in front of us, for example, being the way they are, precisely the way God created them. And of course, as we say, God could be replaced by the source, consciousness, whatever it may be. So when there's a total acceptance of no one being the doer of their actions, then our reactions, which were earlier reactions based on doership, one could call knee-jerk reactions, conditioned reactions, and so on and so forth, now transform. They transform to responses. So this, as he so rightly says, when consciousness has attained the awareness of one power, one law, one substance, one cause, which basically means consciousness is all there is, and we are instruments through whom consciousness functions. So when we do not respond with fear, doubt, or horror to anything seen or heard, then it is that consciousness has gone beyond power and attained the silence, which is the healing consciousness. Basically, it's no longer the consciousness of separation, of me versus you, but it becomes the consciousness of me and you. That silence, which is basically a mind which is equanimous, more calm, more at peace, that heals the wound of separation. Therefore, it is a healing consciousness. I'll read out just one more passage, small one. Goldsmith says, "The sin that crept into Eden was not an apple, nor was it sex, although traditional religious opinion would so identify it. The sin was the acceptance of two powers, and when man began to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he took upon himself a dual universe, so that no longer could it be said that he was too pure to behold iniquity, because now he saw and knew both good and evil." So here we have the original sin according to Joel Goldsmith. Now, for those who are not familiar, Goldsmith was influenced heavily by the Gospel of St. John, and his teachings are a reflection of his interpretation of the teachings of Jesus Christ. And so his definition of original sin comes so close to Advaita, where he says, when man began to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, he took upon himself a dual universe. Which means when something was considered as a power apart from God, it gave birth to a dual universe. Because now he saw and knew both good and evil. You see, these are the primary polarities. The basic concept of Advaita is this is a dual universe. We are born into a framework of duality of every conceivable kind. Up and down, left and right, good and evil, pleasure and pain, rich and poor, black and white, and so on and so forth. Now, this is the framework and structure of duality, of a dualistic world, and what we are born into. But what happens is that with the formation of the ego and the sense of separation, the duality of me and you becomes me versus you. And this is precisely what Goldsmith is pointing to, that when something is considered as apart from God, that is when the original sin manifests. Now, my teacher Rameshji would say that according to him, the original sin was that when one object in manifestation, which is me, considers another object in manifestation, which is you, and passes judgment upon the other object, thinking I am the subject. So I act and feel I am God, I am a subject, and I am able to pronounce my judgment on you, be it blame, condemnation, hatred, ill will, spite, malice, whatever it may be. So this usurping the subjectivity of the source, which is the only one true subject, God, consciousness, the source, is the only one true subject, but in this realm of duality, I consider myself, which is basically just an instrument like the one before me. So I consider myself as the subject, that I am the center of the world, I am the center of the universe through which I proclaim my views, opinions and judgments. This usurping the subjectivity of the source is the original sin. So it's pretty much the same thing, both expressed so beautifully, both definitions of the original sin I felt, one complemented the other so well, and they really lay down the very basic fundamentals of what happened in this dualistic universe in such simple words. And that is why I don't hesitate to say that the way Goldsmith also delivered it by the simple statement, give up the belief in two powers, is really a master key, one could say. Just as Rameshji would say consciousness is all there is, of course referencing to the Mahavakyas of the Vedas also, the great sayings. And such a simple thought can deliver to us with grace, peace of mind in daily living. Thank you.